Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day, and welcome to a video where we're going to be talking about all of the new spells that they added this test round. Where I'm going through every school, I'm going to explain all of it because it took me a while to get it, so let's get right into it. Life actually got a new spell that we've literally never seen, and they got spellman upgrades to a bunch of spells that already exist. So let's look at what they added for life. So Imp is very different now, and honestly, this one is kind of a banger, and it's extremely high utility in my opinion for a 1-pip spell. The second path is really cool, right? What it does, it adds an overtime heal on yourself, and as you progress in spellments, it adds a little bit to the amount of healing, but way more importantly, it adds to the number of rounds that it's on you. So this really is not for healing in my opinion. I think what it is for is you want to hit and break an infection maybe, or which I think this is actually even better for, you can break a shield, sure, but that overtime heal, you can use it to set up a conditional where a spell will do extra damage if you have an overtime heal on you. Now, Leprechaun, I don't know about this one. It's a little strange in my opinion. Basically, right, the utility spellman pad, it adds a pip, right? So not a 2-pip spell, a 3-pip spell, and it hits, sure, but then what it does, it activates a heal. Now activation is just the heal version of detonate. So what does that mean? That means if you have a big overtime heal on yourself, you can activate it and you get the whole heal at that point in time. So you could probably use it with spells like regenerate maybe. I don't really know how useful it is because by the time you do the Leprechaun, the regenerate's already healed you for one of the 3 turns. So really, you're only saving 2 turns. And yes, sometimes those 2 turns will matter, but how often does it matter to the point where you want that spellman? I don't know. Nature's Wrath is really interesting. It's literally a spellman path that just gives you a blade if you happen to be above 50% HP. So essentially, it kind of ties into the fact that life heals a lot. So if you're above 50% HP, you can do this. And by being above 50% HP, you get an extra blade added onto it. I feel like this spell would be really good at pip conserve. And obviously, if you're keeping your HP high, now Seraph is, in my opinion, the biggest surprise. Like, literally, Seraph now, what it does, if you choose to upgrade it, it hits, and then if you have an overtime on you, it pushes that overtime onto your opponent. Let's say that your opponent has a shield and they, like, I don't know, Infernal Summon you could break the shield and push that overtime over to them. Setting up a big overtime might just not be a good idea anymore against life. So, some schools, like, you know, like Ice, like Death, like Fire, they're just gonna be a lot worse against life. But don't worry, they all got new spells, so hopefully life won't be broken. Now, the new spell that we got in Test Realm is Earthwalker. So they added another spell for life at 5 pips because life just never did have that. But Earthwalker is really cool. Now, you actually can train the spell and it won't open a spellman path for some reason. I don't know why. But it is available in the game because I was sent it. So here's the image of the spellman path. And what this essentially does, it just basically works against traps. So you can increase the damage on it based on the number of traps on you. So it's 75 damage per trap, and as you upgrade it, you can increase the max number of traps that you can get extra damage from. Now, based on what this card says, it does not clear the trap. But what it will do is it'll get higher and higher damage as someone traps you more and more. So let's say you somehow manage to max spellment this, right? You're looking at 65 damage times 4 added onto this, and then another 200 damage from a solar surge. That is well over 1,000 damage if someone's not careful about the way they trap against you. I feel like, honestly, if you do this into another card, it might always be better because you're removing traps and buffing yourself up, and there's more powerful spells than this, right? So it depends, I guess, on how many traps you have. Maybe you can do both. Maybe you can carry this and you can carry this in order to do a bunch of damage against trap stackers. And finally, this one basically does more damage if you have an overtime heal on yourself. We kind of went over this, but it needs to be an overtime heal, like, I guess, Imp or Hunting Worm or, you know, Regenerate. It could be any of these. I feel like comboing Imp with Centaur might be a real nice strategy, so we might see a little bit of that. In my opinion, Death got some crazy ones. Is it as good as life? I don't know, a little questionable, I'll say that, but you know, they did get a lot of they got a lot of decent ones. So they got a hidden weakness with Sprite. It's basically like what Scorpion used to be, but they made it into Sprite, but it is 2 pips, so I'm not really sure how useful it is, since even if you spellman upgrade it to the max, it's only a minus 15 weakness. How good is it? Time will tell. I'm not sure it's as good as other hidden weaknesses that Death already has. Ghoul has an upgrade path where you can literally upgrade it to the point where it can drain 70%, which honestly is pretty decent. Like 70% is almost the full thing. You could use this as like a minion killer and get a lot of drain for it. So for once, I feel like the top path is a little bit, you know, comparable to the bottom path. The bottom path, all it really does is is it drains, but it also removes an overtime. So it's like an anti-overtime. It's cool because I don't think we've ever really had that on Adept. Then again, this is still deck space you have to dedicate. How many people are you going to go against that are using overtime heals anyways? Banshee has a crazy upgrade. Basically, if you use the bottom pet, it does damage, and then it does two types of weaknesses, an infection, and it also does a regular weakness. Now, let's not forget that Monster Mash literally does extra damage if your opponent has a weakness on you. So you can use this, and unless they have an anti-weakness Rochambeau spell, like Jin's Vexation, for example, even if they heal or if they hit, right, they still have a weakness on them because of this spell. So it's very easy to combo Banshee now with the Monster Mash, which is something to keep in mind. That might be a very, very easy combo to pull off. Vampire is by far the weirdest one in my opinion because it's kind of nuts. It clears a heal just like Ghoul. But if you do clear, right, if you do clear a heal, it also gives you a shield. Now, the shield doesn't just come naturally, right? You're not just going to be able to spam Vampire and just get minus 50 shields over and over again. Your opponent has to have an overtime heal on them to give you a shield. But it is very interesting. Now, you might have noticed a pattern with this 4-pip spell and Doom Oni. So there might be a pattern where 4-pip spells basically let you buff your pet so that you can do your Oni spell. So that's why the shield might actually be there. Skeletal Pirate is looking juicy. It's very similar to Earthwalker, where it gets better and better based on what your opponent is doing, and it just basically just counters overtime heals. So basically, if your opponent heals, you could do more damage, right, up to 160, but if you go all the way up, actually up to 320 more, depending on how many overtime heals they have. And finally, Wraith. Now, Wraith got a crazy upgrade. It's already a good spell. The top pet, what it does is, when you drain, instead of 50%, you can get up to 60% back on the drain. And the bottom pet is also very decent, because when you upgrade it fully, it becomes a 25 weakness. So basically, if your opponent has a weakness on them, and you upgrade this fully, you can literally drain as you normally would, and then put another weakness on them. So you could combo this Banshee spell with both Wraith and Monster Mash now, and you can also use it with Scion if you really want to. So there's a lot of weaknessing that's happening with Death. Now, Myth got a few bangers, and they're really very, central around Myth's trap identity. So there's a few of these, right? So basically, Bloodbat just hits and then adds a trap, and it can be a 15 trap, it can be even more. It could be good. Again, this is more of like a 2-pip situational, like, are you really gonna do it? At least with Myth, I like this because, you can actually, if someone shields over the trap, you can turn them into other things that are useful. And here's where it gets very interesting, right? Cyclops adds 2 traps, and I really like this because now, right, now we're cooking, because now you had 2 traps. Now if someone shields, you can actually break that and still have a trap remaining and use that to do another hidden trap. So you can literally Cyclops into another Cyclops, and I don't know, even like switch the enchants maybe to stack traps, or you can Bloodbat, or you can Keeper. There's a lot of trap stacking potential with Cyclops, Bloodbat, and Keeper, and those are all very low pips. So shielding against a Myth has become worse and worse as time has gone on. They also changed Minotaur, which basically does more damage if the opponent has traps on them. Now, this is a little hard for me to see myself using. Obviously, yes, the max version of this is extremely good, right? If you have a lot of traps on your opponent, like, yeah, like, right, this adds, like, what, like, almost 400 extra damage? If you Solar Surge this, it's over 1,000, and the key is, it's still a Minotaur. So you can do over 1,000 damage through a shield, essentially, as long as you have a lot of traps on your opponent. I think this gets a lot better if you have a lot of the same traps, so you're not like wasting a bunch of different traps. So that's how I see myself using this. I don't recommend using this if you have a bunch of different traps, because the first hit is still going to use traps. So I don't know how good this actually is. It depends on your playstyle. I'm a little undecided on this one. Now, they also changed Cyclops minion. So basically, you can upgrade your minion pips or your minion health, depending on which path you take. So it's still a 1 to 4 pip minion, but depending on the path you take, your minion will start with extra HP, and it can start with extra pips. Now, let's not forget, the Cyclops minion is what the top thing is. The bottom one is called the Cyclops Ally, so I think it's a different minion altogether. I will be making a video on this minion completely, like, it'll have its own video, so stay tuned for that. And finally, Myth finally has a 6-pip single hit, and they made it into a conditional, which is really, really cool. It basically just does a really nice amount of damage, honestly, for Myth, right? It's not as good as Ninja Pig's, but obviously it has a conditional, so you can make it better than Ninja Pig. But essentially, it just does more damage if you have a weakness on yourself. Now, obviously, hitting with a weakness on is not going to make the extra damage good, so I'm not sure how good it is if you have a regular weakness on, but let's say someone has an infection on you in order to set up a Gambit. Now you can punish that as time goes on before you even remove the weakness. Now, balance seems to have gotten stiffed a little bit. I'll be honest. I mean, we already kind of went over the Hydra leak from a couple of weeks ago, but other than that, they have not gotten much. So I think this is a work in progress. I would not lose hope if you're a balance wizard. Scarab is really cool in the sense that it's just become a universal Scarab. So basically what it is, right? It hits and then it adds, like, I guess a mini Hex onto your opponent. It's decent. It's like a mini Savage Paw. I could totally see myself using this, right, as just a shield breaker to add a trap. The only problem is this is probably just a universal trap, right? So if someone tower shields over it, you're not going to be able to, like, wand hit and break the shield and keep the trap like other schools that might have a hidden trap. Scorpion also got changed quite a bit. It used to give a weakness, but now they've updated it. So the top path is the same. It can literally hit and mantle, which, I mean, if you want to rely on a 25% chance, go off, I guess. The other one is kind of weird to me because it increases a pip cost to 3, but the value of it is neutral because it reduces your opponent's pips by 1. Again, I don't see Scorpion being that good. It could, again, there are slight scenarios where you could use this, but again, this is deck space we're talking about. I'm thinking of packing maybe 1, maybe 2, and hoping that I get it at some good time where it might save my life, but I really doubt that's gonna happen. Now, Locust Swarm is the banger right now. This one is probably my favorite balance spell. This one's really, really good. Now, it doesn't really show that easily on the card art what it is, but basically, right, the bottom path, what it does, it takes 100 damage and then does 375 damage or more depending on how much you upgrade in this path. But what's really, really cool about this 100 damage is it's based on your opponent's school. So let's say that you're going against a Myth that's trap stacking against you. This 100 damage will be Myth damage, which means if they have a bunch of Myth traps, you can remove however many different Myth traps they have on you. What this means is that trap stacking against a balance is just not going to work anymore, right? They can writing the scales, which is already a very, I mean, honestly, this is a very, very good spell, right? This spell literally just gives you pips for whatever traps is on you. But at the end of the day, they're trying to hit you with a bunch of different traps, right? So just do this, right? Trap stack is simply just not going to work if you have Locust Swarm, at least at tier 2. Considering that any school can do that, I feel like that's going to mean a lot. That's a big, big deal, y'all. That's a big deal. Now, Spectral Blast looks like it should have something, but it doesn't, so we're moving on. And Hydra, we already covered it, but basically, there's a path where you can increase the damage, which is very, very valid. Now, depending on the middle or the bottom one, which one you choose, basically that Overtime Blade and Shield, it'll do more damage based on whether it's on you or whether it's on the opponent. Now, there's one more new spell that I feel like again, I'm not sure how completed it is, but if you go to it, you can find it right here. It's called Gearhead Destroyer. And what it does, right, if you happen to buy it, what it does when you upgrade is that you can literally make it remove a bubble. So basically, if there's a bubble on you, you can remove it. So basically, your bubble fighting might be a lot better. Now, this could be really good for balance, or it could be more of like a very defensive move that you just save for the last minute. So balance now has better hits, more bubble fighting, and a very good anti-trap tool. I think Fire got, I think they got nice. They got a hit and detonate. Again, I'm not really sure about any of these 1-pip spells other than Imp. I just don't see them being that good. But you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe if you really need to kill your opponent in time, you can detonate. Again, it's cool, but I don't see this being that good unless you have a very nutty combo. Fire Elf is really interesting, but again, I'm not sure how good it is. Essentially what it does, in case you guys are confused, because I was very confused the first time I saw this, basically it does that 95 plus 135, which is a little bit less than the regular Fire Elf, by the way, right? It's quite a bit less compared to, I don't know, the base form of it. But what it does is, right, once you use it, if you kill whoever you use it on, it also adds a 30 damage per round overtime on everybody on the field. Now, you're probably wondering, in 1v1 when you would ever use this, because if you kill your opponent, they're dead, right? Basically, let's say they have a minion out. You could use this on a minion, kill the minion, and then add an overtime on your opponent as well, all for 2 pips. So minions are probably a very, very bad idea against fire if they choose to do this, especially because you probably will not gain that much tempo with the minion, right? Like shielding after a minion is just going to be stupid, because you can kill the minion and also break that shield in the next turn by using this Spellman upgrade. Sunbird got a weird one, but it could be really good. It's very similar to Blast Off. Basically, what it does is it extends in overtime. So you hit, and then it extends. So let's say that you maybe Salamander, you could hit and add an extra round to that Salamander, which, again, this could be very, very good, but it's also very situational, right? Like, how many times are you going to be able to go against someone where they cannot shift it, right? Which is something that schools can do. They're not going to triage it, and you're also going to be able to expand it. I don't know. Like, again, this could be a very, very good spell, but considering that Life and Myth can now shift overtimes, I'm not sure how good Sunbird is. Now, here's where we start getting to the spells that I think are actually kind of good, and they might actually open up some doors for fire. It's Immolate, Phoenix, and Elephant. I think these are all, like, very, very solid. So what Immolate does, right, you can just increase the damage, and honestly, it's a very good spell, right? If you have a fire shield on you, very good spell. In fact, I honestly think this might be one of the best spells that fire has to hit with right now. But if you go the other route, right, it also adds an overtime heal on you, and it can increase the number of rounds that it's on you, right? Like, if you go all the way to the end of this, it's actually a decent heal, and it's for 5 rounds. So now we might see even more ways where you could actually set up this Infernal Oni combo, and we might even see ways where you might actually see people, like, on other schools trying to set up overtime heals with this and breaking fire traps at the same time. So this spell could be good for fire, and it could be good for other schools. Now, the remaining 2 are hard hitters, and these, I think, this is where fire will really shine. Elephant is kind of straightforward. If your opponent has a shield, it just adds. It just joints on an extra damage. So if you strike and they have shields on them, or if they have shields remaining from set shields like Volcanics, you just get a ton of extra damage, right? I mean, this is a big, big hit. And it's an overtime. So not only do you hit, you get an overtime added on. So I really like this. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's hard to see myself using this regularly unless I see them set shield. So some schools, they don't even really bother set shielding. So somewhat situational, but it's still very decent. The other one, this one, especially at max, I hope that there's an easy way to get max, because I really want to use this. It just adds damage if your opponent has an overtime. Now, this is something that fire just does naturally, so it's a very, very easy way to, like, it's a very easy setup, right? You can elf into a phoenix, you can salamander into a phoenix, you can link into a phoenix, you can do any overtime, and then basically it just adds extra damage. Now, for 5 pips, 185 extra damage means this will do about 1,000 damage if you have an overtime on your opponent. And if you happen to get it all the way up, this is a massive hit. So I would say the phoenix is the best hit that fire has gotten in terms of spellments, and I definitely see myself using this one the most out of all of them. Ice got so many spells that I actually think that they might have gotten one of the biggest buffs that we've ever seen. I really, like, I'm not joking. I really mean this. For starters, their Frost Beetle is actually not bad if you get it all the way up. It's just a hidden shield, and it can add a -25 shield. It's like a mini bomb, and essentially, right? I know what you're thinking. Why would you not just Steel Ward? If it's an ice set shield, you don't have to Frostbite anymore. You don't have to hit and bubble anymore. You can just do this. So this is a very good anti-set shield tool, and it's something that ice really just didn't have. Snow Serpent, not so good in my opinion. You can either increase the damage or let it give you 2 absorbs. Now, this is decent, right? Like, there's basically 2 flat damage absorbs. This isn't bad, right? Like, you can combo it with things that let you do more damage with shields, and that's actually really cool. Like, you can actually do this into like a Colossus, and we'll get to that. But the reason I don't like it is because there are anti-shield gambits that are very popular. It's like a Jin's defense on this is just like, your opponent has 2 shields. So it's decent, not amazing in my opinion, decent at best. Now, this is where it gets absolutely nuts in my opinion. Evil Snowman, we already talked about this, but it is in the game in its current form. It hits, and then it does a shield on you based on the school that you're going against. So as long as the school you're going against isn't balanced, you're getting a set shield for that school. You don't get a shield against a balance, but you get a literal set shield. So, like, let's say that you want to break a shield and you want to get a shield at the same time. You don't have to Frost Beetle. You don't even have to Obama. You can just do this and get a set shield. It cannot be Steel Warded unless, I guess, you're going against an ice, which is kind of nuts. Wyvern does quite a bit. Again, it's very situational, but basically if your opponent has a blade, you could use this bottom path to do some damage, clear the blade, and exchange for clearing the blade, add a trap. Now, I see Wyvern being good if your opponent has one trap, but the second they have more than one, you just use this and you're saving pips, and you're buffing up more hits than just one. So it's situational, but it's decent, right? If they have one blade, which is very common, you could actually use it, get a big trap out of it, and just disarm them at the same time, and break a shield if you happen to have a shield on. Now, Colossus, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of cracked. It's very, very easy to set up. If you have a shield on yourself, you can basically do extra damage. You can combo this with Evil Snowman, or you could just do any sort of set shield, and it does a lot of damage, right? Again, at the max form of this, you're looking at over 1,000 damage just for doing something as simple and ice-like as shielding yourself. Now, there is one more spell that we are gonna get as Ice Wizards. It's the Hailhound spell. Now, I couldn't find this, but again, this was sent to me, so I missed it somewhere. Y'all can let me know where you get this. But bop, it's on the screen right now, and it's basically like an anti-storm type of thing, because storm is very blade heavy. But basically, it's just like the other spells that we've kind of seen similar to this at 5 pips. It just adds damage as your opponent blades. So if your opponent has 4 blades, you can add 75 times 4 to the max form of the Spellman upgrade. Again, it'll be very, very good against blade spammers. I'm not sure how good it is against someone who just casually blades a few times, because you have so many tools against blades as an ice already. I think Storm got the hardest to set up things because they're anti-overtime, which is a little weird. So let's start with a few that aren't kind of weird. Thundersnake is kind of cool. It's basically just a Storm Beetle now, and you can sharpen it. So if you get all the way to max, you're looking at a hidden blade. Doesn't do so bad, you know, it's kind of hot. I like this actually, because not everyone has Storm Beetles, and honestly, if they ever get rid of Storm Beetle, this is now we have an option. We have a nice little hit and buff. Lightning Bat basically hits and triages, so this is the anti-overtime stuff I was talking about. It's decent, but again, it's like, why would you not just triage that hit with a bigger hit? Again, it's situational. I don't mind the 320 damage Lightning Bat though. That's actually not terrible. I know that seems like, you know, whatever, but bro, like in PvE, that's a big hit. That's I could do that just for PvE. I could totally see myself doing that. Storm Shark is an interesting one. It gives you 2 blades. Now, there are blade gambits like Storm Scion that Storm has, so this could be useful for just buffing your next hit and stacking up some heal blades that you can use for other things like Blade Gambit. Now, this is where they go a little crazy with the anti-overtimes. Kraken, honestly, one of the better anti-overtimes, right? It basically hits, and if you have an overtime on you, it clears it and adds a weakness onto your opponent. Now, this weakness gets remarkably good as you tier up. So this is one of those spells that gets a lot better if you have a lot of spellments. I would love to see myself using the max tier version of this, because I don't really see anyone overtiming me. You're literally breaking a shield, triaging, and weaknessing the upcoming hit very, very quickly in rapid succession. So I'd say this is one of the better anti-overtimes. I would not use Lightning Bats over this. Triton is also somewhat of an anti-overtime in the sense that it does more damage if your opponent overtimes. Now, I don't recommend using this compared to Kraken, unless the overtime's a weak overtime, right? So maybe like against Elf, maybe against Hunting Worm, maybe against Poison, but maybe not against Frostbite, maybe not against Inferno Salamander. But yeah, it just basically does more damage if you have an overtime on yourself. Kind of decent. Again, the damage goes crazy on this. I think the damage upgrade is actually better. Again, I think Storm gets a lot of damage upgrades. That might just be better, because look at 920 flat damage. That is very reliable. And finally, we have Stormzilla, which is, I think, one of the best spells that Storm has ever gotten. It essentially just adds damage based on the number of blades you have, and it clears them. So this is going to work a lot better when you don't have Storm Blades, because it clears them. But you could literally have a base damage hit that does like 1200 damage before you enchant it. So if your opponent's not good about removing blades, this is like an easy W. So this is something to watch out for, I think, especially if it's easy to get max tier spellments, or even like tier 3 or tier 4. This is a crazy spell. But yeah, guys, that's the video, man. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for all the support on yesterday's test run stream. There's a lot to cover, so make sure you drop a sub, drop a like, drop a comment, tell me what your favorite spell is in the comments below. Thank you guys for support. Tons of videos coming every day, uploading until I cover everything. I got y'all. As always, if somebody has not told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong, so stay awesome. And yeah.